Physics Bytes,
Physics Bytes,
a science podcast in English by the students of Notre-Dame d'Ascension.
Hello and welcome to Physics Bytes, the English language physics podcast of the students of Notre-Dame d'Ascension here in Paris. We are starting our series with our junior students who had a big project this year about all the new and renewable energies that we're going to be hoping to use in our fight against climate change. And so we're going to start with a topic which is slightly different. We're going to talk about energy storage. And I have four students who are going to talk about it. I'm going to let themselves present themselves.
So I'm Damian, 16.
Okay. We have Damian, who was the student also last year in our class.
Hi, I'm Ambroise, I'm 16 also.
I'm Natacha and I'm also 16.
And you started this year with us. Last year you weren't in the class. And our final student.
And I'm
Matthieu, who also was in the class last year. You're not all four of you guys doing science this year?
Nope.
No.
I know, Damian, you're doing science, physics this year?
Yeah.
And Matthieu? And you guys are not at all doing any sciences?
We aren't.
I'm doing biology.
You are doing some biology, so some sort of science, but not physics. And you're not doing any science on
Economics.
We're talking about real science this year. All right, so let's get started. So why don't you start with giving us a short summary of the main topics in your theme. Give us a little bit of detail on each, and then we'll get into questions. Okay.
So,
what do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm going to start. So, first of all, we introduced all the challenges, the different challenges of energy storage, and why it's important to know about it and to manage it.
So let's get into that right away. Why do you think we included energy storage in our project, which was themed around energy? Why is energy storage so important for us?
Because when you have energy, the problem is you have to save the excess and to release it when it's needed. So if you don't have ways to store your energy, the logistic to have a continuous flow of electricity is just way too complicated and almost impossible. So you have to have good batteries, I can say.
Okay, so we're going to see this when we're going to look at the other forms of energy, but basically the idea is that we don't have enough of a control over energy production so that we can actually know exactly how much to produce at any given moment. So we're going to have moments of excess energy that would go to waste, and other times we are short in energy supply and then we don't know what to do. So energy storage would be the key to sort of smoothing this sort of production surplus and production deficit sort of thing, which is very critical, especially like you guys are going to say when it comes to renewable energies. Okay, so what are the main sort of axes of your topic? What did you guys find and teach us in the whole idea and science of energy storage? Damian, do you want to come up? Begin.
There are multiple parts. For example, energy transmission. So how is the energy we make in power plants and transmitted into your house, and then you can use it. And then for energy storage, we have electrochemical storage, thermal storage, and mechanical storage.
Right. So those are the three sort of main domains, technological domains that we have developed enough to commercialize, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which one is the most developed so far? Which is the one we use in the greatest scale? Do you know?
It's mostly hydroelectric, pumped water.
Right. And I guess more recently, batteries are in full development and scaling up. Okay. What do you guys want to start with? Which form do you want to start with? Maybe we can begin with the most developed ones. Who wants to talk about the storage of energy in forms of reversible dams?
I can talk about storage, hydroelectricity.
Okay, so give us the basic idea.
The basic idea is you have the process divided in two phases. The charging phase is when you have like, for example, water that are moved up to create potential energy that then could be released when you need to when you're short in energy by the water flow is activating.
Okay, so what does it look like, this sort of energy storage through water pumps? Can you give us an idea of what the infrastructure is like?
A big dam that it's in altitude. So you have to have the localization for it. And then you have all the system to move up and down the water So when you are in the charging phase, you move up the water in the big dam. And when you need electricity, you just release some water, and with gravity, it's going to take speed and then activate.
Right. So the idea being that dams, as the hydroelectric group will talk about, is we use the potential energy stored in water. And when we let it sort of fall down through sort of guided conduits, we can use this energy to turn turbines and alternators and produce electricity. What you're saying is we're going to do this in the backward sense, right? Why would we do this? How is this useful for us? Why would we consider this as a form of energy storage?
It's a form of energy storage because of the if you have the localization for it, if you have the space for it, it's an easy way to just using water create stock of energy, of potential energy, and then you can release it.
Right. So we were producing too much energy from like wind power, and we're just going to channel this energy to these sort of reversible dams that we have, and we will pump water back up behind the dam so that maybe later when there's no more wind and we need electricity, we're just going to open up the dam and just use that energy.
And some energy excess of the dam is also used to move up some water.
Okay.
So
okay. How efficient is this technology? Is it efficient?
It's quite efficient. It's about 70 to 85% of efficiency.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So 70 to 85% of the potential electricity is energy is converted to electricity, and it's the energy lost is when pumping and all the friction in the tube.
It's a mechanical way of storage, so any sort of a mechanical system is going to have energy lost due to friction. What are the limitations of this form of energy storage? Are there any?
Yeah, there are. The major one is, like I said, you have to have the space, and the altitude is usually in the mountains.
Right. So you have geographical limits. You can't use this in a country which is mostly flat, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's turn to thermal energy. Natacha, do you want to give us a basic idea of what we mean by thermal energy storage, TES as you called it?
Thermal energy storage, also known as TES, is basically like a giant thermos bottle. It's a way to save heat for later use. Like you have to imagine as if you have an extra hot water from the sun that has been warmed during the day, and TES will let you store that heat and use it to warm your house at night when it's colder.
Okay, so it's a form of energy storage which is very different from what Ambroise was talking about. You're sort of using excess energy that is sort of just present in our daily lives, and then so if we heat water in this way, then we won't have to use electricity or the grid in any way or burning stuff to heat water, right? So it's sort of you're using energy that you're storing, but not from excess production in this case. Okay. Where is this mostly used? You talked about it pairs up really well with another form of energy.
With the solar.
Right. Do you want to maybe go into a little bit of detail how we've managed to pair up together solar energy and this thermal storage?
Yes, there are two types of TES, and the most common one is sensible heat storage. So the solar energy will warm up water or soils or rocks, and then you can use that heat for later.
I remember, I think maybe it was you who talked about it also, or maybe it was a solar energy group. They talked about these sort of solar power plants where we have all these mirrors and they focus the light on this like giant storage area. I think it was a solar group. Okay. You mentioned also latent thermal energy storage.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of what we mean by that? What is latent thermal energy storage?
It is the solar power will heat other materials than soils or water, mostly salts, paraffin, or organic compounds.
Right.
However, it is less common because it is more expensive.
Right.
And it can store 5 to 14 times more energy per unit volume than the sensible heat.
So it's more expensive, but it's also much more efficient, much more high density for energy storage.
But it is more efficient for low temperature energy storage. because the typical operational temperatures are between -20 and 100 degrees.
Okay, so which is pretty practical for like, normal temperatures around where we have in life, but not if you want to use excess energy from industry or something like that. Okay. In general, would you say that thermal energy storage in the various forms that you mentioned, is it commonly used? Is it something that is mostly still in research and development, or is it being commercialized? Yeah, did you find anything in your research about that?
I think it is an energy that is still being developed to make it work better than what it does right now, but it is very beneficial for because it could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10 to 50%. So
right, again, the idea being that we replace energy that's being produced through carbon emitting ways by energy that's being stored naturally from the environment. Okay. So I think the idea we get is that thermal energy is storage is not necessarily the most efficient, the most developed way. It is one amongst many different solutions, but not necessarily the most well developed yet, or the most used. Okay. Well, let's go to another one that is really used a lot, if I'm not mistaken, and that would be electrochemical storage. Yes. I think, Damian, you worked a little bit, or a fair bit, on that. Can you just start with a very global view of what we mean by electrochemical, and then go into specifics, and then maybe you can tell us which forms are most used, which forms are less used. Is there a really good future for this? Is it going to be a solution, or is it something like temporary? Well, leave it up to you, to your discretion.
So the most important aspect of electrochemical storage is the short-term use, as it's present like in most electronics. So for example, when you like turn your phone on, you're using electrochemical storage. And
basically any mobile electronic device that we use is basically using batteries, which is considered electrochemical storage. Okay, yes. Go on.
So for example, if you have like a sudden peak, which you could not anticipate for in the consumption, you would need to supply it with energy. And so you wouldn't, like for example, pumped hydroelectric storage, you would need to start up the turbines, like making water drop. Here it's like almost instant.
Right.
And the smallest difference in energy demand and supply could break up the whole grid. So
right, so it's very decentralized.
Yeah.
You can pretty much have it anywhere, use it anywhere, almost instantly. So that's one of the main benefits of it. Okay, what else?
There are three types. The most common one is lithium ion, then lead acid batteries, and lastly, it's really in development, it's vanadium flow redox battery.
Right. So lithium ion, we hear talk about it all the time because it's what we basically have in every single mobile device. Can you give us a bit, how long have we used this technology? How good is it? Is it really as good as we make it to be?
Well, the thing is, it's good like for short-term storage, like a few days. But more than that, it starts losing its efficiency, and it's also very like the infrastructure you need to put in place will last a very small amount of time.
What is the infrastructure that you're talking about that you mean by that?
Well,
like the production, or is it like installation?
Yeah, the installations, like the batteries you put in places which need it last a very small amount of time, so they need to be replaced, and that puts in the problem of materials. Only 5% of lithium batteries are actually recyclable, like the materials inside.
So there's a huge waste problem with lithium ion, and we have lithium ion batteries now also in electrical cars, right?
Yes.
So and given how much we've increased production and use of electrical cars and electrical vehicles, we have a lot of, you're saying basically we have a lot of waste just sort of floating around waiting to be, we have no ways of dealing with the waste, recycling it, recuperating, I don't know, the lithium for other uses, or is it just that it's very costly maybe?
Well, not really, no, except like the 5%, which are not really lithium, but more the encasing of the batteries.
Okay, so it's not even the actual prime material there.
Yeah, but you can, like, there are more technologies which are like replacing the lithium, such as sodium ion.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you. What is the particularity of lithium and sodium? Why can we replace lithium with sodium? You who have done chemistry for a couple of years, and at least with me last year.
So if you look at the periodic tables of elements, there is a particular column called the metal alkalines,
Right. Which is the first column?
Which is the first column,
Right.
like the one on the left. And if you look, lithium is just above sodium.
Right.
And that choice is the electrochemical potential of them.
And the reason we these alkaline metals and metalloids are useful for this is, do you want to go into some details? And do you know what is it? Yeah. Okay, let's go into details.
An atom wants to be stable, and for them to be stable, they need their outer shell of electrons,
the valence
to
shell.
be full. Yeah, the valence shell. And these metal alkalines have only one electron on the outer shell.
One valence electron.
Yeah, making them very easy to be released.
Right.
And it's that release of those electrons which are used in the batteries.
In the charge transfer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Very good. No, we're not going to go into too much. It's not easy to talk about chemistry, right? Neither to talk about it nor to listen to chemistry. But that's basically it. So lithium, sodium are very similar in their electronic structure, which is why they both can be used in the same way. What would be the benefit of developing more of these sodium-ion batteries instead of lithium? Is there a benefit to it?
There is a benefit to it because, for example, lithium, it has a very small area on Earth where you can find it. Sodium is a lot more widespread. For example, 77% of lithium actually comes from China, making them like they have the entire.
It's sort of a monopoly on it, so it can have geopolitical, economic consequences, whereas sodium is pretty much you can find it anywhere on Earth. Okay, maybe we can quickly talk about the other forms of electrochemical that you talked about, such as the lead acid. I think that's an old technology as well, right?
Yeah, that's an old technology. It's less and less used because it lasts a very small amount of time. It's mostly used in old oil cars.
Right. The car batteries are mostly some variation of lead acid or some sort of a sulfuric acid in there somewhere. Okay. 70% efficiency, you said, but what are the benefits of these ones?
Lead acid batteries, it's the recycling
recyclability.
It's 95% or recyclable.
And we should recycle because otherwise
it causes a big danger on
the lead can be toxic if it gets into the environment. Okay. You talked about a more recent technology called the vanadium redox batteries. What are they?
So it's the idea? Kind of like lithium ion, where they use this transfer of electrons, but here it uses vanadium, which has four main ion forms. So V4 plus, V5 plus, V6 plus, and V7 plus. And through storage, electrons can be passed on from one tank to the other. Right. Making them, that's kind of how they work. So now it's really in development. Only 50 to 80% efficiency. Okay. And one of the things that you mentioned, which is the case for most of these storage through electrochemical means and basically electron transfer, is the idea of cycles. What do you mean by cycles, and why is there sort of a limited number of cycles we can do? What is that all about? Well, for example, lead acid batteries is the best idea. Oh yeah, lead acid batteries gives the best idea. The coffee's coming back. Yeah. So it's a chemical reaction where iron sulfates combine with the lead and lead oxide and release or take electrons, which are being put in an alternate surface. But one point is these atoms, those molecules, can react with other molecules or atoms present around them, like lessening their number. And it creates, like for lead acid batteries, it creates deposits at the very bottom as it draws, and those deposits are unusable. Which the problem that's caused by that is all the charging and recharging. Yeah. And so, in general, batteries can only be charged fully and discharged fully a certain number of times. Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, for example, for lithium ion for telephones and stuff like that, we say about 500 times before they start losing their capacity to store electrical charge. One of the benefits you told me of the vanadium redox is that it can go up to a couple 100,000 cycles, right, before starting to lose its efficiency. Okay, so that's pretty good. Maybe we can go back to Natacha, who also worked on chemical energy storage, since we're trying to make a link, and then we'll come back to Matthieu because he has so much to tell us and he hasn't been able to express himself yet. So what did you mean when you talked about in the presentation of chemical energy storage in general?
So chemical energy storage involves storing energy within the chemical bonds of molecules, and this energy can be released through chemical reactions, typically oxidation or reduction. Right,
which is preferable because that's the form of reaction where we have electrons being exchanged and we can sort of reroute those electrons to make an electrical current. Specifically, you talked about fuel cells and you talked about hydrogen.
Yes, so the most used chemical energy storage are batteries, as Damian said, but there are other ways, such as fuel cells, and they work the same way as batteries, but with continuous fuel supply. Mm-hmm. So it combines fuel, such as oxygen, and an oxidant, such as oxygen.
Right. The main difference being that, for example, in a mobile telephone battery, you have a certain amount of each of the reactants, and once they're used up, you sort of stop producing electricity. Here, you're saying we're continuously supplying it, so it can be a battery that's sort of continuously functioning.
Yes.
Okay. And what are the other benefits of it, like hydrogen fuel cells in particular? Because that's something that even when I was a student, we were talking about it. What are the main benefits of that in general? You talked about I think something about how it doesn't produce any waste or any sort of emissions. Do you want to just give us a short, brief idea of what we mean by that?
It has an efficiency of 40% to 60%, so it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And it can be used in transport, typically in electric vehicles. Right. And it would help reducing gas emission, especially tailpipe emission.
Right, because basically the emissions would be water, right?
Yes.
And water vapor, which is not an emission at all. Okay, but it's mainly used or usable for transport.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's maybe come back to Ambroise to finish up on mechanical storage, and then we'll put a bow on it with Matthieu, who's going to talk to us mostly about transmission. Can you give us a few other examples of mechanical energy storage? You talked about these reversible pumps, these reversible dams, but what are some of the more modern or more futuristic ideas of storage? And you can tell us how they work and also maybe what scale they can be used at.
So for because one of the main disadvantages of dams are the scale. It's really large. If you want it to be economically viable, you have to it has to be in really, really large scale.
Right. So either we have to be able to produce it in large scale, or we have to be able to sort of spread it out. Okay,
yeah. So as I was saying, even if the pumped hydroelectricity takes up for 94% of the global energy storage capacity,
mechanical storage,
storage. There are many other ways with like the what we call flywheel.
Let's talk about that. What do we mean by flywheel technology? What is flywheel storage?
Like any other mechanical storage, there's a charging phase and a discharging phase, and you can have to see like a big wheel that is floating to reduce friction, and
like it's in a container which has no air.
Yeah,
which is in a vacuum.
Yeah,
okay,
in a vacuum, and so excess electricity is going to power a motor that's going to spin the flywheel, and at very, very high speeds, and it's going to store the energy as rotational kinetic energy.
Right, or what we can call in a common language like the inertia of this. Yeah, it's a very, very heavy wheel, right?
Yeah, really
it's almost like a cylinder?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when energy is needed, so the discharging phase, the speed of the wheel is going to decrease, and then the kinetic energy drives the motor in reverse, and it's going to act as a generator to produce electricity, and it's really efficient. So 85 to 90%
Wow,
efficiency.
Much better than the chemical ones that we just saw.
Yeah, it's not really. It's quite green. It's eco-friendly because it's mostly steel or composite material that aren't really durable and also
Not particularly toxic either.
and not particularly toxic. And it's it's quite interesting because it's instant response time. So unless the pumped hydroelectricity storage, it's almost instantaneous, and it's
It's not very costly, I suppose.
no,
And you can build like lots of it everywhere
yeah,
if you want. Okay.
and so it's ideal for when you have you need a quick energy release. To compensate the grid,
But you can't use it as sort of long-term storage, right? It's like
no,
very
for
short
you have to
period
keep
to
it
sort of
rotating.
Okay, so I guess the idea we're going to get with a lot of the presentations and the talks that we're going to have is that there's no one good solution. Every solution has its benefits, has its use cases,
And there's limits.
and it has its limits. So it's a question of how do we combine all of this to get the best sort of combination. I think this is particularly the case with you guys in your energy storage and transmission, is that there's no one ideal solution. Every solution has a use case. So the question would be how to match it up and organize it, like you say, with some other form of storage or production. Okay, you talked about compressed air storage. Do you want to talk about that?
So compressed air storage is another system, and it's still in development. It's less advanced than the other one, but it's basically excess electricity that is going to compress air, and then you with excess heat or electricity, you're going to hit the air. It's going to expand and driving turbines that are connected to a generator and going to create electricity.
We only have one way of producing electricity is with turbines.
Yeah.
Okay. And you talked also about gravity-based storages?
Yeah. So gravity-based storage is more of a really large domain because there are many types, and there's a lot of new technology that are getting invented with the gravity-based energy storage system. So the really simple concept is you lift a heavy object really high up, and then you just drop it down.
Right.
And
So you use excess energy to lift something up, and then when you want to use that energy that you stored in the potential energy of the weight, you drop it again. Kind of like your reversible dams.
And the challenge of it is to make it not really energy energy cost-wise. You have to make it not really costly to lift the object up.
Right.
And it has to not take too much space, because then you would just have like big towers everywhere, and that wouldn't be suitable for society.
I remember reading something about China having its first sort of gravity-based storage park coming in online a few months ago.
Some of the new technologies are like using parachutes and everything.
Right.
To lift.
So there's no shortage of ideas, as we're going to see with a lot of the other presentations. The question is a question of scale, cost in the end, and time. Okay, well, we're not too far off from the end, and we still haven't heard from Matthieu, who focused his work more on energy transmission. Do you want to give us an overall view of what you talked about, what you researched, and then we'll get into maybe a couple of details?
So first, I talk about energy transmission and mainly about electricity grid.
Right. Why is this an important question? Why do we have to think about that? Why is it not just like, oh, we have a grid, we are distributing energy? Why do we need to think about a new one? Why is this a central question for the future?
Because I think so the demands rise up, and so we need to expand the grid, and so distribute electricity to everyone. Right,
and we also have to have, as your teammates sort of talked about, we have to be able to respond more quickly. We have to improve the quality of our grid to reduce losses. Okay. You told us there's 18 million kilometers of cables. because we're producing and we're consuming 2 times more energy than 1979. You talked about different types of lines, high voltage lines.
Yes, there's 2 types of lines, like high voltage line and low voltage line. So so high voltage line is mainly for the transmission part of electricity. Like
basically connecting the producer to local grids.
Local grids. So we use a high voltage line to wide distances for a great
why do we so a physics question for you, because you're doing physics, why do we want, for long distance transmission, why do we want to use high voltages?
I don't know.
We talked about it last year in class, Matthieu.
I think because there is less losses with high voltages.
Why is there less losses when we have higher voltages? Anybody can answer the question. We did this in class, huh? At the end of the year. Damian, Ambroise, Natacha? No?
I know that when there's high voltage, there is a low ampere.
Right, low amperage or lower intensity of current.
Yeah.
And why is that a good thing?
Because there's less of that energy being converted into heat.
Exactly. What was the name of that phenomenon? The conversion of electricity into heat energy. It was named after a famous scientist, physicist who worked on energy. It's called the Joule effect, right? The Joule effect, which tells us that the amount of heat produced is proportional to the resistance, but proportional to the square of the amperes, right? So the higher the intensity, the higher the energy loss. So if we have high voltage, like you said, we have lower intensity, we lose much less energy, which is good, because what's the point of producing a lot of energy if we're going to lose most of it on the way to the destination? Okay, very good. How do we manage to change the voltage? You talked about something that we've had for a good 100 years.
So in the grid, we use electrical transformers.
Right.
They call step generator. So there is 2 types of step generator. So there is the step up generator and the step down generator.
And just in a very quick way, what is the role that each of these play?
So the step up generator change the voltage and the intensity, so they heighten the voltage.
That's when we use. So where do we use the step up transformers?
So,
at which stage?
Between the producing parts of electricity and the transmission.
Right. So the power plant or wherever we're producing electricity, it first goes to a step up. It goes to, how high does it go to the voltage?
Around 400,000 volts.
Right, which is very, very high difference in potential. It's transmitted to like a city, and then before it gets to the city, it gets to another transforming station.
Yes, so we need to have another transforming station, because the voltage, like in the distribution sector around customers, is around 120 voltage and 240 volts.
In Europe, so different countries, different regions have different voltages. For us, it's 240. In North America, it's 120. But the idea is the same. You have to take that 400,000 volt signal and then step it down.
Yes, with the step down generator.
Okay. You also talked about there's like 3 types of grids.
Yes, so there's 3 types of grid that are used for different uses and places. First, we have the microgrid, which is globally a local grid.
Right.
It's usually part of the regional wide area.
Right.
And it's
just like a neighborhood, right?
Yes, it's synchronized with the grid, but it can be disconnected and operate autonomously, like in island. And so they are cheaper, and they're mainly used in island or isolated areas.
Okay, and they are basically low voltage grids.
Yes.
Okay. What's the second kind of grid?
We have the wide area synchronous grid.
Right.
Which is like the global grid. It's known as an interconnection. So it connects many generators that are delivering alternative current, which is the current used in the grid.
Right.
And
which is the kind that, well, basically your voltage is alternating between a max and a min value, right? And the frequency of these grids it's important because you mentioned that. So why is it called a synchronous grid?
Because they need to be synchronized with other grids, like other local grids, like microgrid.
Right. And other producers of energy,
Yes,
right? So like power
producers.
plants. You said that in North America there's like
Yes.
four giant.
For example, yes, there is 4 giant interconnection. Like we have the Western interconnection, the Eastern interconnection, and the Quebec and Texas interconnection.
Right. So these are all like pretty big
Yes, so-
networks in and of themselves.
That is big.
Right. And then you talked about the idea of a supergrid.
Yes, so supergrid is like wide area synchronous grid, but it's like a big one, very big one. So it's intended to make the trade of high volume of electricity across great distances, and it can support a global energy transition by smoothing local fluctuation.
Right. So basically, those 4 wide area grids that you talked about, together they form one supergrid.
Yes.
Or what we have in Europe is like one supergrid.
Yes. So
Okay.
supergrid is like for continent.
Did you come across the idea of smart grids when you were doing your research? Or any of you guys like a smart grid? Do you know what we mean by smart grids, like future generation grids? Damian, you have an idea?
Yeah, the smart grids is considered as the future of grids. It's basically
Distribution.
and distribution. It's kind of like grids, which is autonomous, meaning it's gonna supply the electricity in different parts. So now it's made a lot. It's being developed with AI. So
Right.
meaning it can anticipate, for example,
And better
parts
storage
and
technology.
better storage. So you can anticipate a high peak at a certain place and have energy come to that place.
Right. So this is why distribution and storage go together. It's like if we look at the way the body works, you have to have like amounts of oxygen and sugar that go to different parts. And so you need different elements. You need to be able to measure in a very precise, instantaneous way what the needs are in different areas and how it's changing, and have a grid that is able to distribute that and have a means of like storing. If there's too much sugar coming in, it gets stored somewhere. When we have lack of sugar, we can bring it back. There's a good analogy going there. Okay, I think we kind of went over most of the topics that you talked about. Was there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't really manage to go over? Any of you guys know? It was a pretty complete talk that you guys gave. Okay, so I have a question for you. Yeah. What?
Maybe I don't know if we have time, but we didn't
Like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, we don't really talk about the high costs of most, and even the cost of most of the different types of energy storage.
Okay, well, give us
But
a general overview of the economics
For
of storage.
an overview, most of it is really cost is really high. So
And why is that the case? Do you know? Why is the
it
cost?
depends. It's different reason for different types, but like for lithium-ion batteries, it's mostly the materials and also the production.
Right, economies of scale. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if we take lithium-ion on cost on average for it's $132 for per kilowatt-hour.
Mhm.
So it's really high cost, and the new technologies and all the development is really centered on reducing the cost or finding new alternative.
Okay, but that is going to be one of the things that's going to change wildly
Yeah.
because first of all, we're going to learn to do it better and in higher quantities. There's new research coming in, I suppose, that's helping us maybe find cheaper ways of doing things. Okay, so let me just ask you guys each one final question before we finish up. I'm curious to see, I'll start with Ambroise and Natacha, because you guys are not doing necessarily science this year. What did you find particularly interesting when you did your research? What was the most shocking thing or the most surprising thing that you found? And then we'll go to Matthieu and Damian. Ambroise?
For me, the most surprising thing is that we don't really have conscience of the importance of the grid.
Right.
It's really a major challenge in today's economy and today's society, and also the environmental impacts was quite surprising for me, because I didn't thought that storing energy is that much of a problem. And physics-wise, I've found it interesting, because it's for mechanical energy, it's mostly really simple physics.
It's not technologically very different.
Yeah, but it's really developed, and I found it really interesting.
Okay. Natacha, what did you find particularly interesting, striking, surprising during your research on this topic?
I found interesting that there are different types of storage for every energy.
Right. So many. There's so many. Yeah.
And I think we have to understand how each storage work to find a way to store more energy.
Right, and more efficiently at a wider scale.
Yeah, I also think that it is a really interesting subject also on the political view, because there are so many things going on that we don't particularly understand.
Right, I think as long as we're talking about energy or anything linked with energy, it's inseparable from politics and economics, just because who's got the main materials, who's got the technology, who do you want to share it with? That's a very, very good point. Matthieu, what did you find interesting in your researches?
I find interesting that so the grid is composed of many sectors first. So I discovered that. So first we have the generation sectors. So the transmission sectors that we told before, the distribution sector and the customer sector.
Right.
And I think it was really interesting to know the way to pass from the generation sector to the transmission sector by the step generator.
Right.
I also learned how the step generator works.
Right, which is something we're going to do maybe a bit next year if you're still
It's quite complicated, and I think I can't explain how it works.
No, we're not going to explain physics on a podcast.
Yes.
I think it's interesting, the question of distribution, because here in France, we did have a bit of a controversy a few years ago when there was this push from the government to install Linky electrical measuring devices in every house. And people are like, oh, it's going to get information on me. But that's part of, renewing the grid and having more rapid access to information about consumption and usage so that we can better adapt the system. And then we'll finish up with Damian. What did you find interesting or new or striking in your research, or did you know everything already?
No, I ignored a few things, like for example the batteries. I had a vague idea of how they work,
right,
but now I know precisely how they work. And there was also with the transmission, the whole grid thing, because when you have electricity, when you turn on the lights or when you charge up your phone, you don't realize how much is actually going into it so that the whole thing doesn't break down.
Right. But that's, I think, true of most technology. We use it as if it was just a given, and there's so much work and interesting stuff behind it for it to become so natural. I think personally, the more I read into this, the more I realize that the key for using renewable energies as a main source of energy is going to be storage, because renewables inevitably are the most intermittent form of energy. So we're not going to ever be able to really use them as a main form of energy if we can't get over this problem of storage. And that's often when you guys ask questions about what can I do in my studies later on. What material science is basically the main domain of physics, which works on a lot of these problems. So those who are interested in physics, who also want to make some money, who also want to do something which is less than just purely theoretical, well, material science is free. All right, so thank you to all four of you. Your presentation was really good. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is Physics Bytes for this week. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we would love to hear what you thought about the topic in the comments section. If you did enjoy the show, then subscribe to our podcast, share it with your friends, and be sure to leave us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. And more important than all of that, come back soon for a new episode.